I would like to kind of take a step back and learn more about Brandon as a young kiddo. How did you get into herbalism, and maybe kind of talk about maybe who some of your mentors have been, et cetera?
Yeah, over the course of the time that I've been working with plant medicine, which I feel like I started getting into it more intentionally when I was about 16 or so. In high school, I had a teacher who's a photography teacher, some completely unrelated, but was always like making juice and doing wheatgrass and stuff like that. And I think she saw my interest of like, what's up with the green juice you have?
Mm,
And so I ended up, she kind of fostered that and would be like, you want to grow wheatgrass? I'll show you how to make juice, this. So the evolution of it was kind of like I got into juicing and,
sure.
plant-based diets and things like that. And the idea of like health foods or eating things that were considered good for me, or, like this word superfood. And then as I got more
I'm
into
gonna
it,
ask you about that later. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm
yeah,
gonna ask you about that later. So, but yeah,
I'm
please
always like, got
continue.
my fingers in the frame so I can show them the
Yeah,
quotes.
totally.
Yeah, the that whole concept, and over time being like, oh, there's like a lot of these random plants aside from the ones that are marketed and branded a certain way that are really great for you. And so my education with that was kind of on my own sort of thing at the beginning of that journey. I know after high school, I did it was like a plant-based nutrition course with Cornell. They have like an online program for that. And after that, it was more I'm in the woods, I'm learning and like trying to ID plants. In 2017 or 16, I took I think it's the holistic herbalism course, like a 6 month thing with Corey Pine Shane
Oh,
and at the
nice.
Ruiz School of Herbal Medicine. And that was really helpful. That was a big focus on a lot of the more, Western herbs and Appalachian herbs. Before all of this, I was introduced, one of the plants that actually comes up that I know I did a monograph for
That's right.
with HerbRally was noni juice.
Mm,
And my grandmother would give me that. She sent it when I had this really crazy tonsil infection, and they were going to take my tonsils out. And she sent it to me, and within a week or so, the infection was gone. And there was sort of, and I think this is a relatable thing for a lot of people, especially of the diaspora who don't grow up within the countries where their families are from. I wasn't super connected a lot of the times with certain, foods or practices or certain things like that. And
totally.
so over time, my interest that builded with it when I started to practice herbal medicine was like talking to my family members and going to Puerto Rico and like being able to see the stuff that grows around and listening like that. And so I definitely feel like for a majority of the time I've had working with plant medicine, I did a lot of like just sort of self-education, being in the
Sure.
woods, learning about those things, and then doing the same in the tropics, especially in Puerto Rico, and like developing this sort of identity for things to say, I love these plants. I love Appalachia and, the Blue
Sure.
Ridge Mountains and all these things. But I feel more of a connection in the Caribbean. And so
Absolutely.
having both of those as my basis of like my herbal knowledge feels really cool because I can kind of connect with two different worlds.
Mm.
Um, but but yeah, so I would say, overall, I think that teacher was a big help that kind of like opened me up to it as something to be intentionally interested in. But it was also fostered once I asked the questions and communicated with my family as like, oh yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, you've written about your abuela or your abuelas before, and I'm kind of curious, have they taught you, say, food is medicine, or was it just kind of part of daily life for you, or how do you look at your family and specifically your abuelas as your teachers?
Yeah, on my mother's side, so both of my grandparents, both of my abuelos on her side, they live together in Guaynabo, Puerto Rico. They just grew up a very specific lifestyle of being out in the mountains, like in very
Yeah.
rural areas, living off the land, whether it's the food or the herbal medicines and things like that. And over time, just developing something that is very common knowledge, like a lot of people in different parts of the world. You develop this sort of idea. People don't call themselves an herbalist or a farmer or whatever. It's just
Right,
about how you exist.
right.
And so on that side of the family, for sure, a lot of support with like the interest in it and telling me things about it or answering questions or different traditions. On my dad's side, so my dad is half Puerto Rican and then half his mother's a Polish Jew.
Hmm.
And she is super into, my grandfather had passed when I was pretty young. So I didn't have too much of a connection in this realm with him on that. But my grandmother is still here and she's really into what I do in general. She
That's
supports it a
cool.
lot with like the food aspect, with the herbalism aspect, with the whole, teaching or whatever else it is. But has always definitely been like that in general with me. She told me one time as a kid, she came and like babysat me, and I had all these like Vienna sausages or something, and she would like switch them out for soy sausages or little things like he has to have this food, he has to whatever. And so I think that influence was there and she fostered that. And then in looking for it more with my other side of the family, it was also very, very prominent. So
How old are you now, Brandon?
26.
26. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I saw a post where you were teaching at the International Herb Symposium, and I want to say you said you were 26 in that post, so maybe that was just
Yeah. It was
recently.
like
And
right on my birthday. Yeah.
yeah, that was so cool. And you were telling me, oh, I got into like juicing and all that hippie shit, back in the day when you're like what 15, 16, and it's just so awesome that 10 years later you're teaching at the International Herb Symposium. I don't know, I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it really is. I think sometimes I have a mindset about like creating things or teaching or material or whatever, this idea of growth that I get really rigid with. But
Yeah.
I think it is really cool to look back and be like, wow, like what a change in how things change over time, and
Yeah.
how at that point I wouldn't have even fathomed like teaching people or talking. I remember like when I would first start teaching, it was funny. I'm still, I think, learning more about this, but I would write down and be like, this is exactly what I'm going to say. And every bullet point, and every whatever, it has to be exactly 45 minutes or something like that. And
Mm,
now, I've done like 5, 6 hour things where I don't have notes. I'm
that's
like,
nice.
it happens more organically. I'm sure, like, because, I'm doing this. It's kind of like talking with a friend. Like you talk about it, it's an organic conversation. You're interested in these things. You have all these side notes. And the more rigorous sort of setup or structure of it, I think it makes it more difficult for my brain at least. But yeah, over time, I think seeing the journey that has been really, really cool.
I very much resonate with that. That was one of the reasons I put off doing the podcast for so long was because I just didn't really know how to do it. And I was incredibly intimidated by it. I was like, how do you interview someone? And now that I'm doing it, you kind of pick up the ins and outs of it and you get better hopefully over time. And it sounds like you're doing that with teaching. Do you kind of view yourself? Have you always kind of been like a natural born teacher, or is it something you've just developed over time?
Maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know, because I don't think I was ever put in other situations where I was in that way.
Yeah.
I feel like growing up, I was kind of in my own sort of thing, not really like the person to like gather a group together, be like the
Mm,
leader.
sure.
But I think personally, I feel like because I'm passionate about it and because I will talk about it
Yeah.
unnecessarily in other situations, when I get the opportunity to talk about it intentionally, it's like, oh, I can do this forever.
For sure.
So I think that maybe I've developed it over time, but also still learning it because I didn't really think of the idea of teaching when I first got interested in it.